excellent teaching staff who are supportive and non-teaching staff to help the institution. And this is the vision, and chairman always talk about quality of education, and we are striving to reach that, and we are accredited with the NAC with B+ in second cycle, and we have started this, and this is our third series of lecture on webinar on from the Oxford College of Pharmacy. And now I request Ms. Shravani to introduce the speaker of the day. Ms. Shravani too.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am. Hello, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to today's webinar. I would like to introduce myself first. My name is Shravani T, working as Assistant Professor in the Oxford College of Pharmacy, Bangalore. Firstly, I thank all the participants for registering and joining this webinar on the topic QSAR and Introduction. I take this privilege on behalf of our chairman, Shri SNVL Narasimharaju Garu, the Oxford Group of Institutions, Principal Dr. Padma M. Parak, the Oxford College of Pharmacy, HODs and staff of various departments, to introduce the guest speaker of this webinar, Dr. A. Gerard Suresh, Principal, College of Pharmacy, Madras Medical College, Chennai. Here is a brief introduction about our speaker, Dr. A. Suresh. Dr. A. Gerard Suresh, presently working as Principal, College of Pharmacy, Madras Medical College, Chennai, completed his B. Pharm from Madras Medical College, University of Madras, and M. Pharm from Banaras Hindu University, Varanasi, PhD from Sri Ramchandra University, Porur, Chennai, MBA from Anna University, Guindy, Chennai. Sir is having an experience of 30 years in teaching pharmacy to students of diploma, degree and postgraduate courses in pharmacy, and to the students of nursing and medicine. Sir has published over 150 research papers in national and international journals, filed over 20 patents, and was awarded one international patent for South Korea. And he was a co-authored the book Principles of Medicinal Chemistry, and he is a consultant of World Bank Drug Logistics. We all welcome you on behalf of the Oxford College of Pharmacy as well as from all the participants, sir. Thank you.
Sir, unmute your mic.
Good morning. Can you hear me? Pardon?
I'll share my screen.
Hello.
And we can start with your presentation.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. 1 second, sir. I'll start your presentation.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can see the screen, all of you?
Yeah, I can see the screen.
Yeah, you can start, sir.
Okay. Shall I start?
Yeah, you can start, sir.
Good morning to you all. And before I start, my thanks to Dr. Padma for this nice introduction. This topic, QSAR, Quantitative Structure Activity Relationship, is meant for students of the B Pharmacy course who have to take an introduction to medicinal chemistry. It can also be useful for students of the first year postgraduate program who need to refresh their idea about quantitative structure activity relationship. I hope I am audible.
I request all
am
the
I audible?
Yeah, you are audible. I request all the participants to mute their mic, please.
Okay.
Yeah, proceed.
Yeah, because there is some background noise of a child. Okay. Okay. Next slide, please. Next slide, please.
Yeah, 1 second. Something has happened. It is not moving. Yeah, 1 second. Some glitch. Yeah. Next slide is moved, Dr. Suresh.
Yeah, this is thank you. So before we plunge into the topic, topic of quantitative structure activity relationship, we need to know what drug discovery is about. Drug discovery is an expensive and time-consuming process. Actually, the process includes the time from when the initial discovery is made and until it lands on the lands in a pharmacy. So the effort of every medicinal chemist is to reduce this time and cost. And in this direction, several advances have been made. I will just mention a few. One is about microwave synthesis, combinatorial synthesis, and computer-aided drug design. I'm not saying that these are the only advances. There are several advances. To mention a few, I am making this point. Next slide, please. Next slide.
Have changed it.
So when I said it costs a lot of money, how much money does it cost? Okay, it takes at least 10 years for a new medicine to complete its journey from the initial discovery to the marketplace, with clinical trials alone taking around 6 to 7 years on an average. The average cost to research and develop each successful drug is approximately around 2.6 billion US dollars, which in Indian currency translates to 260 crores. So we understand that this is a lot of time and money. Next slide, please. Okay, so it is because of this cost and it is because of the time lag. And about time lags, we would appreciate it now. All students will be able to appreciate time lags now better than at any other time. We have a pandemic on hand and we are trying to discover drugs for it. So now you understand that this time should definitely be reduced. Okay, so microwave synthesis. In microwave synthesis, we would be normally in a normal synthesis, which would take around a few hours, maybe even 24 hours. We will be able to accomplish the same by the use of microwaves, and this greatly reduces the time. This is one such effort at reducing the time. Let's take combinatorial synthesis. In a conventional synthesis, we will be able to synthesize only one compound at a time. But in combinatorial synthesis, we can synthesize hundreds or say even thousands of compounds, what we call as a library of compounds in one go. Okay, there are different procedures, the solid phase procedure and the liquid phase procedure. Whatever be the procedure, we will be able to synthesize several compounds at a time. And of course, computational chemistry, which is the topic of focus today, which will be used for QSAR studies. So CAD or computer aided drug design. Next slide, please. So I said the cost of research and development comes to around 260 crores of Indian rupees. Now, this is not just the cost of discovering, getting one molecule on the shelf of your pharmacist. It is actually the cost, it includes the cost of hundreds of molecules which might be synthesized and screened early in the R&D phase, but would fail to make it. Okay, what happened to be good at the stage of screening, initial screening, it might not have had the requisite admit properties, and therefore it would have failed. And it is this $2.6 billion or 260 crores includes the cost of many such molecules which fall on the way. The actual probability of clinical success is estimated to be less than 12%. That means if you were to proceed with 100 compounds to the final stage, before the final stage, only 12 compounds out of the 100 are likely to make it. So this is a very small probability. And for the steps prior to it, you would have taken more and more such compounds. Okay, so is this whole process a waste of time? Next slide, please. Is this a waste of time and a waste of money? Okay, how do we reduce it? That's what we're going to discuss in the next slide. So this can be averted. Next slide, please.
Put the next slide.
This can be averted by rational drug design. So making compounds which may not ultimately be a clinical success can be averted by resorting to rational drug design, which is achieved through statistical tools and by computers. We have several softwares that help in predicting the expected physicochemical nature, which help in predicting the expected physicochemical nature of organic compounds, which ultimately have a bearing upon the biological activity. So QSAR studies, docking studies, okay, all of them help us to determine the biological activity in a predictive manner. Next slide, please. So next slide, please. So QSAR studies are based on developing a mathematical model which relates biological activity to one or more physicochemical property of the molecule. If only one physicochemical property is involved, we use a simple linear regression equation. If several physicochemical parameters are related to the biological activity, then we have a multiple linear regression equation. Okay, so next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay, so what we are trying to do is we are trying to get a mathematical expression to relate biological activity to the physicochemical parameter of a molecule. So we have two variables, one the independent variable and the dependent variable and the independent variable. Biological activity is a function of one or more physicochemical properties of a molecule, which means in statistical language, biological activity is dependent on what values the physicochemical parameter takes. Next slide, please. Okay. Now, we have a situation where we are going to develop a mathematical model, and this mathematical model should be of the best fit. When we use the word best fit, we understand that it must be better than another fit that we know of. Okay, what is that? Now let us assume that the values of biological activity arising from 7 different experiments are given. We have the biological activity which is a result of 7 different experiments. We are not relating the biological activity to any physicochemical property, but just presented with 7 values corresponding to 7 different experiments. The biological activity is dependent on something, but here that parameter on which it is dependent is not given. In such a case, how do we predict the biological activity for the 8th experiment? The only way to do it is we can take the average of the 7 and say this could probably be the predicted value for the 8th experiment. Okay, so in this situation, we have only a dependent variable and we are not given any independent variable. Okay, so if we were to plot biological activity on the y-axis and the number of experiments on the x-axis. On the x-axis, it is not a variable. We are not given the variable. It is only pertaining to, it is a descriptor that is given on the x value or for the x value. Now you will get a plot as you can see in the next slide. Next slide, please. Okay, so now you see there is a dotted line. We have plotted biological activity against not against a variable, but against the descriptor value only. So here you see a dotted line. Here the slope of this is a straight line. So we can say it follows the linear equation for a straight line. Y is equal to mx plus b. But you know, the slope is 0 and there is no value for x. Therefore, y is equal to b. which is called the intercept. Shall we have the next slide? However, if the values of the physicochemical parameters are given, that is both dependent and independent variables are given, and a plot is made, we would expect a plot as shown in the coming slide. The straight line that emerges will be y is equal to mx plus b, where m is the slope and b the intercept. So if the values of b and m are known for a given value of x, we can tell the value of y. In short, for a given value of the independent variable x, that is the physicochemical parameter, we would be able to tell what would be the value for the dependent variable. Next slide, please. Okay. Next slide, please.
Yeah, I've done that. This is
okay.
The slide.
So I have retained the earlier plot, which is a dotted red line, and now when we know the independent variable, we have a straight line, which is the green line, which is also linear. Y is equal to mx plus b. Now you can see that this line does have a slope and it does have a value for x. Okay. Next slide, please. Next slide, please.
Yeah,
so here b is the intercept. Okay, the value that y takes when x is equal to 0. So what do you say is an intercept? An intercept is that point where the where the straight line crosses the y-axis when x is equal to 0. So that is called the intercept. So in this equation, y is equal to mx plus b, y is equal to m into x equal to 0 plus b, y is equal to b. So y equal to b is called the intercept. M is the slope, that is the increase in value of y for 1 unit increase in the value of x. So in the diagram, I have shown that for the movement from the point on the x-axis corresponding to 2, and if it has to move up to the point 3, that is what is called as run, and the rise is the distance at the point at which it touches the green line. So it is actually a ratio of rise by run. When the run is 1 and if the rise is 2, then the slope is 2 by 1. 2 by 1 we can say is 2. Next slide, please. From time to time, we have to remind ourselves what we are talking about. We are talking about quantitative structure-activity relationship. That is, we are trying to quantify the biological activity and relate it to physicochemical parameters. So, in a graphical representation, we want to determine the most appropriate relationship, and from that help us predict values. So, in that effort, we are now trying to make a graphical representation. So for a plot of a given set of data, it may not be possible to draw a line that passes through every point, the first graph which I am shown. What we normally land up is a scatter of plots like the one shown on the right. This is how it lands. Now, a straight line is one that should pass through at least 2 points, isn't it? Okay, so we are supposed to draw a line that passes through any 2 points. Okay, or there is one other point which has to be remembered, that a line that we draw in this case should pass through the centroid. What is the centroid? The centroid is the average of x value. You get a data point for x bar and y bar, where x bar is the average of the x values and y bar is the average of the y. Such a line should and will and must pass through this centroid. Next slide, please. So when you have a scatter plot, it is not possible to draw a straight line that passes through all the points. In fact, we can draw only a line of best fit where some of the plots may be above or below the line. Such a line is referred to as the regression line. In statistics, this line is called as y hat, H-A-T, okay, hat, that which you wear on your head, you know, y hat. Actually, it is represented by an inverted V, which is placed over the y. Okay, in statistics, this is called as y hat when they are predictions of true values. So when they are not true values, but they are only predictions, then we will call it as y hat. The y hat line is a prediction of y for a given value of x. In a next slide, please.
I've done that.
No. I think you have jumped the regression line error terms.
No,
okay. So in a scatter plot, it is possible to draw any number of lines passing through the plots, but the line in which the plots are away from the line are at the least distance from the plot are desirable. These plots which are above the line are positive and those below will have negative values. When we add up all the distances, we will get 0, and this doesn't help in determining anything. So what we will do is we will square the distances to make the negative values assume positive values, and then we sum up, we get the sum of squares of errors. This is called as SSE. Next slide, please. Okay, so when the SSE is minimum, we get the line of best fit. Okay, for your understanding, I repeat, we have drawn a line which passes through some of the plots, but there are some plots which are above and below. Now we will have to square the distances of these plots and square them and add. That value is called as SSE. Okay, squared sum of errors. When SSE, so if there are number of lines that can be passed, that line in which the SSE is minimum will be the line that correctly gives you a relationship between the dependent and the independent variable. So dear students, this is critical for your understanding. When we have a scatter plot and when any number of lines can be drawn to connect any 2 points, then we need to draw a line that passes through the centroid, okay, where the centroid is nothing but a plot determined by x bar and y bar, that is the average of x and y. And even then you can have several plots. Okay, you can have several lines passing through the centroid and touching 2 different points. So which of these lines will correctly represent or give you an equation that correctly represents the relationship between biological activity and any physicochemical parameter? That is the question on hand. Okay, so now you can see that the red line is representative of y hat, y bar is the green line, and for any value of the ith item, say yi, and the corresponding xi, I have given you the values of the bracketed areas show what is SSE and SST. SST is the total, is the sum squares of total, okay? Sum of squared thing, which is actually equal to the SSR plus the SSE. So what is SSR? Yes, the total error is divided into the sum of squares of errors and the sum of square of regression. So when we drew the first line without the independent variable, we would have got a total error. Okay, so by doing regression, we have reduced the error. You can see in purple that when we do a regression, that error is reduced. Next slide, please. Next slide.
I'm done.
Can I have the next slide? Okay. Now, what is R square? R square is nothing but the correlation coefficient. It is the proportion of total variations that is explained. R square is actually equal to SSR, that is the sum of squared regression and the total. Okay, so sum of the squares of the explained deviation and sum of the squares of total variation. The lower the SSE, the SSR will be higher. When SSR is almost equal to SST, then R square will be higher. Next slide. Next slide, please. Okay, so this slide I'm showing you how you determine what is the formula that is used to determine m, the slope. Okay, here x bar is the mean of the independent variable for any physicochemical parameter. Y bar is the mean of the dependent variable, that is the biological activity. Xi is the value of any independent variable, and yi the value of the dependent variable, and b is the intercept. Knowing these, okay, all these are known values, so you will be able to determine the value of m. Next slide, please. So from this equation, you can get the value of b also. Now that you know the value of m and b, you can predict for any given value of x what will be the value, value of y, that is the biological activity. Simple linear equation is designed to find the best fitting line through the data that minimizes the sum of squared errors. That is actually our goal. Okay. So multiple regression is nothing but an extension of the simple linear regression. Simple linear regression, one independent variable affects the dependent variable. In multiple regression, two or more independent variables are needed to explain the variation of the dependent variable. Next slide. Next slide, please. Adding more independent variables in a multiple equation does not make better prediction. So just because there are several parameters that you believe could affect biological activity, we should not be including all the parameters unless it is going to really make a contribution to it. Okay, actually by adding more parameters, we can make matters worse. No, why you have skipped the slide?
Yeah, sorry, it happened.
Previous slide.
Yeah, it is previous slide only.
And that is called as overfitting. When you include too many parameters, then the situation can be bad, which is called as overfitting. Of course, there's another concept also called underfitting. Anyway, we will not delve into that. When more independent variables are included, more relationships are created among them. This is called as multi-collinearity. So there are two problems with multiple regressions. Don't take in too many parameters than are actually necessary, because we could land up in a problem called overfitting. Similarly, don't include too many variables where there should be a relationship between biological activity and the physicochemical property, but there should not be a relationship between the physicochemical properties themselves. Then it will lead to a problem called multicollinearity. Ideally, it is desirable that all independent variables are correlated with the dependent variable, but not with each other. That is very important. Okay. Yes. Next slide, please. Okay. In a multiple linear regression, if we wish to predict biological activity on the basis of two or more physicochemical parameters, that is the independent variable, say partition coefficient and electronic, you have skipped it. You have skipped the slide.
No, it is there.
Say partition coefficient and electronic parameter. The linear regression equation model is y hat is equal to mx plus b. The multiple linear regression equation will be y hat plus b plus m1x plus m2x plus, if it is more than 2, then it goes on up to mnx. Okay. So m1, m2, mn are all coefficients of independent variables. B is the estimate of the intercept and y hat is the predicted value of the dependent variable. Okay, next slide, please. Interpreting the coefficients. Now take an example where we have y hat is equal to 27 plus 9x1 plus 12x2, where x1 is an independent variable 1 and x2 is an independent variable 2, and y hat is the predicted value of dependent variable. In multiple regression, each coefficient is interpreted as the estimated change in y corresponding to a change in a variable, corresponding to the change in a variable when all other variables are held constant. That is very important. Okay, that we should not change all the variables at the same time. Keeping the other variables constant, we can see what is the effect of change for one of the variables in question. Next slide, please. Next slide. Okay, so I told you repeatedly, I will get back to the point as to what we are talking about. When we started, you were told that you are in medicinal chemistry lecture. We are going to talk about quantitative structure activity relationship, where we are going to relate the structure to biological activity and quantifying the same. And then we moved into something which looks more like a class in statistics. Yes, these are statistical tools which are going to be helpful in predicting the biological activity. So we were trying to set up a mathematical equation that relates biological activity to any physicochemical parameter, say one or more physicochemical parameters. So if we were to take first a single physicochemical parameter and make a plot of the biological activity against it, then we will get, normally we will get a scatter plot. We will not get a plot in such a manner such that we will be able to draw a straight line that touches all the data points. It is not possible. It will normally be a scatter diagram, and we will have to figure out what the centroid is and then draw lines. When we draw such lines, there will be several such lines, and then we will have to figure out which is the line of best fit. The line of best fit will be the line where the SSE value is less. Okay, so always regression, simple linear regression is about comparing what happens when we have knowledge about an independent variable to a situation where we do not have any idea, when you do not have any idea about the independent variable. So it's a comparison between these two systems. So the total error in both the cases will remain the same, but when we draw a straight line which is of the best fit, then we will error becomes partitioned into two, that is sum of squared errors and sum of squared regression. Okay, error due to regression. Because we have drawn the regression line, now the error is minimized, and because the error is minimized, this line might best represent the biological activity to the physicochemical parameter. Okay, how do we know that we have made a good, this is the best line? Okay, there are various ways of knowing that, and that is what this slide is going to discuss about. Okay, correlation coefficient, okay, which is the square of the correlation coefficient, R or R square, are the measures of the quality of fit of the model. A high value of correlation coefficient indicates the statistical significance of the regression equation. The squared correlation is a measure of the explained variance represented as a percentage value. For the example, R equal to 9 is accepted value. R equal to 9 is an accepted value for goodness. So value of R square is equal to, R square means 9 nines are 81. So 0.81 is also acceptable, or any value about 0.81 for R square is also acceptable. Then standard error of estimate. Next slide. That is the second way how we validate. This tells us how well the relationship derived by the QSAR analysis predicts the observed biological activity, not deserved, observed biological activity. Its value considers the number of objects n and the number of variables k. Therefore, S depends not just the quality of the fit, but also on the number of degrees of freedom. The smaller the value of S, the better is the QSAR. And of course, we can also find out what is the F value. It is the measure of statistical significance of the regression model. Okay. So my dear friends, we come to not the end of the lecture, but we can take a pause here for a minute. And when I pause it, next slide, please. I advise you to go through this topic, simple linear regression. Next slide, please. Okay, this YouTube simple linear regression. There are 4 videos in it, and multiple linear regression. There are 7 videos by Brandon Foles. So type in simple linear regression by Brandon Foles on your YouTube, and you will be able to get better insights if in case you are not able to follow this statistics part of this lecture. I will just pause for 1 minute and be back with you in exactly 1 minute's time. Okay, so be online. I'll be back with you. Okay, are we ready to go? Okay, shall I start?
One sec.
Shall I start?
Yeah, where is your, I'm seeing your slide.
Start. Yeah.
Oh, it has come from beginning.
Yeah, you can move forward. Yeah. Okay. So in the first part, I've established a mathematical equation whereby you can properly relate biological activity to any physicochemical parameter. It may be one physicochemical parameter or many physicochemical parameters. The point is, we have also validated by finding out what is the R square value, the F value, and the S value. That is the standard error values. So now we know through the values of R square, and S and F, whether the line that we have, the mathematical model that we have developed is a fit enough model. Okay. But so far I was telling you physicochemical parameters, but I didn't tell you what these physicochemical parameters that are normally involved. Okay, can I have the slide, please? There are several physicochemical parameters and physical, structural and chemical properties of a molecule that contribute to biological activity. The important ones are hydrophobic, electronic, and steric parameters. I am not saying that these are the only parameters, but these are some of the important parameters. These properties can be easily quantified. In this, the hydrophobic properties can be easily quantified for complete molecules or for individual substituent on the molecule. For electronic and steric properties, I can say that they are difficult to quantify for complete molecules and only feasible for individual substituents which are present on the molecule. In next slide, in QSAR studies, we carry out these studies not on a variety of totally different structures, but on a congeneric series of compounds with the same general structure where substituents, say on aromatic rings or accessible functional groups, are varied. I can give you 2 examples. A homologous series of alcohols like methyl alcohol, ethanol, propanol, butanol, they form a congeneric series of compounds. Yes, they are all having the same functional group, but they differ in the alkyl chain. So that can be, when we talk about QSAR studies, it should be on such kind of congeneric groups. Or we can take, say, an aromatic nucleus, and we can vary the substituents on these aromatic nucleus that would also form a congeneric series. So hydrophobic character of a molecule, next slide. Hydrophobic character of a molecule is crucial for it to cross cell membranes and may be important even for receptor interactions. Changing substituents can influence the hydrophobic nature and therefore the biological activity of a molecule. I know why we have not got the slide.
Yeah, I'm also seeing that only.
Okay, so we have the hydrophobic character of a molecule is crucial for what? For the molecule to cross cell membranes, and may also be important for receptor interactions, but critically only for crossing cell membranes. And when we change a substituent on that particular molecule, then we will get a compound with a different hydrophobic nature, and therefore the biological activity also is likely to change. The change in hydrophobicity due to the change in the substituent is quantitatively determined by studying partition coefficient effects. So how do we find out what is the change in the hydrophobic nature of an unsubstituted compound and a substituted compound? We will do what is called as partition coefficient. Okay, so the manner in which a molecule will partition itself between two layers, that is an aqueous layer and a non-aqueous layer, okay, that is to actually simulate body conditions, is called as partitioning, is called as the partitioning effect. The manner in which a molecule partitions itself between the lipid and the aqueous layer in the body is simulated by adding a quantity of the drug into a system which contains N-octanol and water. During partition, drugs partition themselves between the organic and the aqueous layer. The amount of drug in each layer is determined quantitatively to get P, the partition coefficient. So P is equal to concentration of drug in N-octanol divided by the concentration of drug in water. Hydrophobic compounds actually have high P values, whereas hydrophilic compounds will have low P values. Changing the substituents on the lead compound will produce a series of analogues having different hydrophobic properties and therefore different P values. Plotting the P values against biological activity will help us to gain an idea if there is any relationship between the two. As I told you, this is one of the physicochemical parameter, that is partitioning effect leads to what is called as P values. So whether this hydrophobicity has a bearing upon biological activity, we can plot. So you can see there is a graph below. Okay, biological activity, which is normally expressed in terms of 1 by C, where C is the concentration of the drug required to achieve a defined level of biological activity. Why do we take 1 by C instead of taking C straight away? We take 1 by C, that is the reciprocal, that is 1 by C, because more active drugs will achieve a defined biological activity at lower concentrations itself. Therefore, we take 1 by C rather than taking C. And when you have a plot which is log 1 by C versus log P and restrict it to a small range, that is when log P value is between 1 to 4, I will tell you what happens if the log P value is above 4, what will happen, I will tell you later. But right now, if we were to plot logarithmic value of 1 by C against logarithmic P values, and you restrict this to a small range, say log P equal to 1 to 4, then we get a straight line indicating that there is a linear relationship between hydrophobicity and biological activity. Such a line would have the equation log 1 by C is equal to K1 log P plus K2. Okay. it is the same thing that we had discussed in the earlier part. Only point is we have taken logarithmic values and biological activity is defined as logarithm of 1 by c. Otherwise, you will realize that it is the same equation. Next slide, please. However, when log p increases beyond a point, then biological activity does not increase. So we thought it will always have a linear relationship. That is, as the log p value increases, we thought that biological activity will also continue to increase. It doesn't happen so. Why it not? In fact, after a log p value of 4, the biological activity decreases. That means there is an optimum value for biological activity, an optimum value of log p for the best biological activity. Okay. So why is this so? Why don't we get a straight line, but we get a parabolic curve? Why do we get it? There are 3 reasons. Next slide, please. Next slide. The hydrophobicity is so large that the drug gets trapped in the fat depots in the body and does not reach the intended site. This is the main reason. The hydrophobicity is so high that it goes and settles very well. You know, like dissolves like. So in the fatty membranes, this hydrophobic substance will go and settle, and we will not be able to reach the intended site. Hydrophobic drugs are more susceptible to metabolism and subsequent elimination. That is the next problem. If it is a hydrophobic drug, then it is more susceptible to metabolism. Therefore, it cannot elicit its biological activity. It immediately is destroyed and sent out, even before it can elicit its biological effect. And drugs become so hydrophobic that it is too poorly soluble in aqueous medium. But you know, the human system needs it to partition between the fat and the aqueous layers in order to bring about the biological effect. So it should not be too. These are 3 reasons why a drug should not be too hydrophobic. If it is too hydrophobic, then one or more of these factors could result in lesser biological activity. Next slide. Next slide. So far, I have been talking about a linear relationship, and it was so simple for me to say y is equal to mx plus b, or biological activity log 1 by c is equal to mx plus b, okay, where m is a constant and b is the value of the intercept and m is that of the slope and so on. But now it is parabolic, and in a parabolic relationship, the equation takes the form logarithm of 1 by c is equal to minus k1 logarithm of p square. There is a minus term. For a moment, if you were to forget this minus term, you have only k2 log p plus k3. Okay, so nothing is minus. But now when you have the minus term, then you can see that this value has to be reduced. Okay, so biological activity is okay, but we should also understand that biological activity is normally related not just to hydrophobicity but also to other physicochemical parameters. One exception being general anesthetics. General anesthetics are dependent only on hydrophobic parameter. Okay, such drugs tend to operate on cell membranes where hydrophobicity is the dominant feature controlling their action. General anesthetics function by entering the CNS and dissolving into the cell membranes where they affect membrane structure and nerve function. There are no specific drug receptor interactions, and the metabolism of the drug action is controlled purely by its ability to the cell membranes, that is its hydrophobicity. Okay, so we started off this lecture where we said we know only something about biological activity, and we do not know any information. We do not have any information about any independent variable. Then in the second part of the lecture, I introduced one independent variable, that is hydrophobicity, and said that there are many molecules. Most of the molecules will not be dependent only on hydrophobicity. Therefore, we will have to introduce other parameters also. Of course, there is one exception, that is that of the general anesthetics, where they are dependent only on hydrophobicity and on no other feature. Next slide, please. So the general anesthetic activity of a range of ethers was found to fit the parabolic equation logarithm of 1 by c is equal to minus 0.22 log p the whole square plus 1.04 log p plus 2.16. The equation shows that there is an optimum value for log p beyond which general anesthetic activity will decrease. With this equation, it's possible to predict the general anesthetic activity of other compounds given their partition coefficient. The equation is applicable only for ether-based general anesthetics, and that too for a series of compounds with the same basic structure. Studies in general anesthetics with other general structures also yield a parabolic curve for general anesthetic activity. Next slide. Although the constants for such equation is different, the optimum hydrophobicity required for log p for anesthetic activity is close to 2.3, or let us say 2, regardless of the structure type of general anesthetic. This proves that all general anesthetics operate in a similar fashion, controlled by the hydrophobicity of the structure, which means if you are asked to develop a general anesthetic, what you will bear in mind is only one feature, and therefore you should be happy. You will not be asked anything about electronic effect, steric effect, nothing. You will be questioned only about whether it is having good hydrophobic property. And what is the good hydrophobic property? A hydrophobic property where the log p value is close to 2. Ether, chloroform, halogen have log p values of 0.98, 1.97 and 2.3 respectively. Drugs, there are two conclusions that you can come. Drugs designed to act on CNS should have log p values equal or close to 2. Drugs which are required to act elsewhere should have log p values higher or much lower than 2 to ensure that they do not exhibit CNS side effects. This is the problem. Okay. So the drugs should not be having any action on the CNS. Okay. And any anti-allergic, antihistaminic should not make you feel drowsy. That means that antihistaminic should have very low log p values. Okay. So there's one thing that might occur when we studied about, we are now actually trying to close this idea about hydrophobic properties, and therefore I want to dwell on this point. Why are they using N-octanol in these QSAR studies? Okay, why not any other substance? Because it is chemically unreactive. So when you are doing a partition study, this N-octanol should not react in any other way. Okay, it should only be able to dissolve the substance, but not anything further. Moreover, it is cheap and it is non-toxic. If it is toxic, it becomes very difficult for us to work with it. And the OH group has both hydrogen donor and hydrogen acceptor features which are capable of interacting with large variety of polar groups. Despite its hydrophobic attributes, capable of dissolving many organic compounds. It is UV transparent. That is very important. This point is very important. It's UV transparent over a wide range and has a vapor pressure low enough to allow reproducible measurements. It should be UV transparent because many of these assays to find out the concentrations would be a UV based assay. Therefore, it should be UV transparent. Then what is called, now we come to substituent hydrophobicity constant. when I began the second part and started talking about the physicochemical parameters, I told you that hydrophobicity can be determined for a whole molecule and also for small substituents. Okay, so that is what we are going to see now. Hydrophobicity of a compound is quantified by determining log P value, which is determined experimentally. So to determine log P values, we need to synthesize each and every compound. However, we can theoretically calculate log P by using hydrophobic substituent constants, that is called as pi. So we have two concepts, log P and pi. Log P is the value for the entire molecule and pi value is for the hydrophobic constant value, okay, for a small substituent. Okay, by knowing this hydrophobic substituent constant, we can calculate the log P of several compounds even without synthesizing or by use of these values. We will see how it is done. This is done by determining the partition coefficient experimentally for a standard molecule. Let's say benzene, an unsubstituted compound. Say benzene with and without, and also by taking another compound which has a substituent. Let us say you take benzene and toluene. Okay. Then the hydrophobicity constant pi for a substituent X, which I will call as pi subscript X, is obtained by using the following equation. Pi X is equal to log P of X minus log P of H. Log P of H means the unsubstituted compound. Log P is the value for the compound which has a substituent X. So the pi value is obtained by log Px minus log Ph. A positive value of pi indicates that the substituent is more hydrophobic than hydrogen, while a negative value of pi indicates that the substituent is less hydrophobic. That is the point. If we can experimentally determine the partition coefficient of a lead molecule, then with known pi values for different substituents, we can design a molecule with desirable substituents. So here is how we come to design molecules. Okay, we can find out even before synthesizing what could be the pi value, the log P value of a compound merely by knowing the value that the substituent components would make it either more hydrophobic or less hydrophobic. And depending upon that, we can suitably design a molecule and go for the synthesis. However, it must be noted that pi values of a given group is different when it is a substituent on an aliphatic compound and when it is an aromatic substituent. So if I say I have the pi value, if I give you a pi value for OH, you must immediately ask me whether it is for a OH, or which is a substituent on an aromatic ring, or whether it is the OH value corresponding to a substituent on an aliphatic skeleton. Get my point? Okay. So that is why I have given you a table. You can see for pi, which is an aliphatic substituent, if you have a methyl group, it is 0.5 when it is on an aliphatic substituent, which is an aliphatic substituent, and when it is an aromatic substituent, it is 0.52. Similarly, the tertiary butyl group takes values 1.68, and in this case, of course, it's also 1.68. But take the next one, OH, it is minus 1.16 and minus 0.67. So when we are talking of hydrophobic substituent constant, we must be clear that there are two different sets of values depending on whether it is a substituent on an aromatic ring or whether it is a substituent in an aliphatic system. Next slide, please. Just to demonstrate how this is possible, I am taking this problem for you. Calculate the log P value of chlorobenzamide given the following values. Log P benzene is equal to 2.13. Log P for chlorobenzene is 2.84. Log P for benzamide is 0.64. The pi substituent value for chlorine is 0.71, and the pi substituent constant for CONH2 is minus 1.49. Okay. Now we want to know what is the value for chlorobenzamide. So log P of chlorobenzamide is equal to log P of benzene plus the pi value for chlorine and the pi substituent value for CONH2, and it works out to 1.35. So we are able to calculate the value of log P for chlorobenzamide even without synthesizing. Okay. So this is the strength of this system. The experimentally obtained value was 1.51. So if you take the real chlorobenzamide and find out the log P value, it was found to be 1.51. Okay, so this indicates that the calculated values are only good approximations, but they are good approximations. In order to distinguish log P values which are obtained by calculation from those that are obtained experimentally, we will call these values as C log P, just to show that they are obtained by calculation and not by experiment. So these are called as C log P. Next slide. Next slide, please. Can I have the next slide? Electronic effects. So we have finished everything to do with hydrophobic feature. Now we will go to the electronic feature. The electronic effects of various substituents will also influence the drug's ionization or polarity. So what will this do? This will affect biological activity because it will affect how easily a drug can pass through the membranes or how strongly it can interact with the binding sites. Substituents on an aromatic ring are studied using Hammett substituent constant. Okay, so here also we make a distinction. Okay, Hammett constant is to study the substituent effects for substituents on an aromatic ring, which means at the end of this subdivision on electronic effects, I will also talk about substituents, what happens to values for those substituents which are present on aliphatic systems. Okay, so first let's talk about the Hammett substituent constant. It's a measure of the electron withdrawing or electron donating ability of a substituent. It is determined by measuring the dissociation constant of a series of substituted benzoic acid and compare the dissociation of benzoic acid. So benzoic acid is unsubstituted. You take a series of substituted benzoic acids and then you can find out what is the substitute value for each substituent. So benzoic acid is a weak acid. Next slide. And it is only partially ionizes in water. So I've shown you the dissociation. Next slide, please. So for this, we can say that the dissociation constant is as shown there in red. The ionized form, the concentration of the ionized form divided by the concentration of the unionized form. So when a substituent is present in the aromatic ring, the equilibrium is affected. Electron withdrawing groups like nitro stabilize the formation of the carboxylate ion. So what will happen? The equilibrium will shift towards the formation of the carboxylate ion. The equilibrium shifts more to the ionized form such that the substituted benzoic acid is a strong acid and has a larger K value. The converse applies when we are having electron donating groups. The Hammett substituent constant, okay, small sigma x for a particular substituent x is defined by the following equation. Sigma x is equal to logarithm of kx divided by kh is equal to logarithm of kx minus logarithm of kh. Benzoic acid containing electron withdrawing groups will have larger K values than benzoic acid itself, and so the value of sigma x for electron withdrawing substituents will be positive. Example will be Cl, Cn, CF3. Benzoic acid which contains electron donating groups will have smaller K values than benzoic acid itself and will have the substituent values which will be negative. So examples are CH3 minus, C2H5 minus and tertiary butyl group. Hammett substituent constant for the unsubstituted compound, okay, is 0. The Hammett substituent constant takes into account both resonance and inductive effects. Both resonance and inductive effects. So we should be bothered whether the substituent is in meta or para positions. I will later tell you why we need not be bothered about the ortho positions. Okay, because depending upon whether the substituent is in the ortho or meta position, we would have different values because resonance and inductive effect come into play. So depending upon whether it is meta substituted or para substituted, we will have sigma p or sigma m to denote the point at which it is substituted. In the meta position, the electron withdrawing power is due to the inductive influence of the substituent. But at the para position, both inductive and resonance will play a part. Therefore, sigma p will always be larger than sigma m. When more than one substituent is on an aromatic ring, so far we said about one. What happens when there are more than one? Then we just sum up the values. That is all. Okay. Then we have tables of constants. So for all the substituent values, which will quantify the inductive and its resonance effects. In certain cases, a substituent effect is due to inductive rather than resonance, and vice versa also is possible. In certain cases, substituents have more significant effect at a particular position on the ring. Hammett substituent constants cannot be measured for ortho substituents because such substituents will have steric effect as well as electronic effect. That is why we are not bothered at this point about ortho substituted groups, but rather about meta and para substitutions. Okay. So I told you that since Hammett substituent constants are for substitutions on an aromatic ring, there must be something for substituents which are present in an aliphatic system. So consider, next slide please. Next slide please. Okay, by the time we get the slide, I will recapitulate whatever we have seen so far. Okay, before I took a pause for 1 minute, I was trying to explain to you how biological activity is dependent on one or more physicochemical parameter. So we started a situation where we just have the information about biological activity, that is the dependent variable, and we have no idea or clue whatsoever about the independent variables. Then what happens when we plot the value of biological activity against one of the physicochemical parameters, and I told you what a scatter plot is. And then I told you from a scatter plot how to get a line of best fit. Then I told you how we can validate whether this is the line of best fit. Okay, all this I said prior to my 1 minute break. Then in my second part of the lecture, I started by telling you what are the different independent variables, and the three important ones are hydrophobic, electronic and steric parameters. And then I went into saying how important the hydrophobic feature is, but I also told you that there's hardly any drug that is dependent only on hydrophobic character. Why did you remove the slide? Please put it.
One second.
I am just recapitulating because you are taking a little time. Okay, I'm coming back because students, when we go for a long time, they will lose as to where they are in the middle of a jungle. So we try to retrace the path. That is all. Okay. So I was talking to you about hydrophobic features, and then the substituent constants also, and then we've gone into the electronic effect. When we are talking about electronic substitution constants, I told you there are two possibilities. One is for aromatic substituents where we apply Hammett's constant, and now we have come to aliphatic electronic substituents. Okay, so this is the maze through which we have traveled. So time and again, I try to put you into to know where you have come from and where we are at the moment. Okay, now let me tell you about this aliphatic electronic substituents. These were obtained by measuring the rates of hydrolysis for a series of aliphatic esters. You know, esters can be hydrolyzed to give acid and alcohol. So you take a number of esters and find out the rates of hydrolysis. Methyl ethanoate is taken as the parent ester, and against this only you are going to study the others. So methyl ethanoate is the parent ester. The rate of hydrolysis is affected by the substituent X. The extent to which the rate of hydrolysis is affected is a measure of the substituent's electronic effect on the rate of the reaction. The electronic effect is purely inductive and is given by the symbol sigma. The electron donating groups reduce the rate of hydrolysis, and the electron withdrawing groups, the electronic effect is purely inductive in nature. The electron donating groups reduce the rate of hydrolysis and so have a negative value, whereas the electron withdrawing groups have increased the rate of hydrolysis and have positive values. Inductive effect is not the only factor affecting hydrolysis. The substituent may also have a steric effect. So now from hydrophobic to electronic, now we move over to steric factors. Next slide, please. Steric factor pertains to the bulk, and that is the size and shape of a drug, which influences how easily it can approach and interact with a binding site. The bulky substituent can hinder the ideal interaction. So if it is very big, obviously it cannot interact well. Okay. It may also help to orient a drug properly for maximum binding and to increase activity. Steric properties are more difficult to quantify than the hydrophobic or the electronic properties. So it's highly unlikely that the bioavailability will be affected by steric factor alone. So methods of quantifying steric factors. Okay, there we had for electronic substitutions we had Hammett's constant. Here we have tap steric factor, which is given by the term ES, E sub S actually. It's given as a subscript. The value of ES can be determined by comparing the rates of hydrolysis of substituted aliphatic esters having a standard ester under acidic conditions. So ES is equal to logarithm of Kx minus logarithm of Ko, where Ko represents the rate of hydrolysis of the reference ester and Kx represents the rate of hydrolysis of an aliphatic ester bearing the substituent group X. The substituent that can be studied by this method are restricted to those that interact sterically with the tetrahedral transition state of the reaction and not by resonance or internal hydrogen bonding. So I have given a table where you see some of the ES values. For H, when it is H, it is 1.24. For F, it is 0.78. For Me, it is 0. For ethyl group, it is minus 0.7. And for N-propyl, it is minus 0.36. And for N-butyl is minus 0.39. The reference ether has X equal to CH3. That's why that value is taken as 0. It cannot be 0 because it cannot be H. Okay, because in this case it will not be an ester, isn't it? So the substituent here should be a methyl, is taken as a methyl group, the smallest group with which it can form the ester, and therefore each value is taken as 0. Substituents such as H and F, which are smaller than a CH3 group, result in faster rates of hydrolysis, making Ks greater than Ko, making ES positive. Substituents which are larger than methyl group reduce the rate of hydrolysis, which makes ES negative. And an advantage with ES values is that they are a measure of the intramolecular steric effect, whereas drugs interact with target binding sites in an intramolecular manner. The ES value for a branched chain isopropyl group is minus 0.47, which is significantly greater than that for a linear N-propyl group, that is minus 0.36, since the bulk of the substituent is closer to the reaction center. Extending the allyl chain from an N-propyl to N-butyl has little effect on ES. The larger N-butyl group is extended away from the reaction center and therefore it will not have any additional steric effect on the rate of hydrolysis. Now, steric effect and molar refractivity. I told you steric effect is about size. That means when there is size, then it has a surface which is large enough to determine refraction. Okay. Therefore, we talk here about molar refraction. It's a measure of a steric effect. It's a measure of the volume occupied by an atom or a group of atoms. It's given by the formula, as you can see, MR is equal to n square minus 1 by n square minus 2, which is actually the correlation factor for polarization. N is equal to the index of refraction, which is multiplied by molecular weight into density, which defines the volume. So this is particularly significant if the substituent has pi electrons and lone pair of electrons. So only in such situations where you have pi electrons or a lone pair of electrons, this molar refractivity becomes important. Then we have steric factor, that is the Verloop steric parameter. Next slide, please. Sterimol actually is a computer program which is used to calculate steric substituent values, which is called as the Verloop steric parameter from standard bond angles, van der Waals radii, bond length, and possible conformations for the substituent. So it takes into account all possible three-dimensional aspects. The Verloop steric parameter can be measured for any substituent unlike ES. Verloop steric parameter for a carboxylic acid is shown in the diagram, okay, where L, capital L, is the length of the substituent and B1 to B4 are the radii of the group in different dimensions. Okay, so it takes into account all the dimensions to study the bulk of the group. Okay, so so far we have talked about some important physicochemical parameters, that is hydrophobic parameter, Hammett electronic parameter, and then we saw about steric parameter. Okay, so we also said that for most of the drugs, it is not just one physicochemical parameter that is responsible for biological activity. In fact, more than one physicochemical parameter is normally involved. Hansch analysis actually is a multi-parametric approach. Because the bioavailability of a molecule is rarely dependent on a single physicochemical parameter. A simple regression equation does not suffice to represent the relationship between bioavailability and physicochemical parameters. Hansch analysis is a multi-parametric approach which factors in all the required physicochemical parameters that influence bioavailability. This leads to what is called as multiple regression equation. Once again, I need to emphasize that when we say include all possible factors that could influence biological activity, we should take the ones that are only really important. Otherwise, we could land in the problem of multicollinearity or overfitting. Okay, so actually, what is bioavailability and what is it dependent upon? Bioavailability is dependent on two processes: the journey of the drug from the point where it is administered or where it enters the body to the site of action, and the interaction of the drug with the receptors at the site of action. Therefore, bioavailability of a drug is dependent on a combination of log P representing the transport through the membranes and Hammett's sigma constant representing electronic interaction at the site of action. So the following equation, which you can see on the screen, okay, represents the basic Hansch equation, including these two parameters. That is, log 1 by C is equal to K1 log P plus K2 sigma plus K3, where C is the concentration required to produce a biological effect, a specific effect, and K1, K2, K3 are constants. The equation cannot be solved uniquely for one compound. If a series of compounds are considered, then which have the same gross structure, I said congeneric, no, but different only in their substituents, then it is reasonable to suppose that all members of the series will act in the same way with the same rate limiting step. Such a series is congeneric, and the set of individual equations form a set of simultaneous equations from which we will be able to calculate the values for K1, K2 and K3. Okay, Hansch analysis in that we will see linear and curvilinear relationships. When the range of hydrophobicity is limited to a small value, as we saw earlier, between 1 to 4, there will be a linear relationship. But when it exceeds 4, normally we see that there is a decrease in biological activity, and this will result in a curvilinear effect. So log 1 by C, if it is linear, it will be log 1 by C equal to K1 log P plus K2 sigma plus K3 ES plus K4. It can go on. You have included 3 parameters in this equation. If log P values are spread over a large range, the equation will be parabolic. That is log 1 by C is equal to minus K1 log P the whole square plus K2 log P plus K3 sigma plus K4 ES plus K5, where the constants K1 to K5 are determined by computer software in order to get the best fitting equations. Okay, so now we will see. So Hansch analysis includes more than one parameter. You get one single equation. Okay, that is the significant point. Whenever we give a Hansch equation, it will be followed by the values of R square and the error term, and also the number of molecules that have been considered in the study. So here in this case, consider the adrenergic blocking activity of beta halo aryl amines. The blocking activity is related to both sigma and pi, and it did not include a steric parameter. So the equation is log 1 by C is equal to 1.22 pi minus 1.59 sigma plus 7.89. From the above equation, we can infer that bioavailability increases if the substituents have a positive pi value. If they have a positive pi value, but if they have a negative sigma value, okay, the substituent should be hydrophobic and electron donating. If it is electron withdrawing, then that will also be a positive value. So it should be only hydrophobic and electron donating. So we can choose substituents carefully such that we include substituents that have a large pi value, and which will carefully choose electron donating groups which will make the sigma value lesser. The correlation coefficient is greater than 0.8. You can see it is 0.841. So greater than 0.8 is acceptable, and the error value is also small, 0.238. Therefore, it's a validated equation. It's a validated equation. Please give me a minute. I will be with you, join with you after 1 minute, and I promise you I will not take too much time. I will take only 10 minutes after this. Agreed?
Okay.
Agreed, Dr. Padma?
Yeah, okay, no problem.
Only 10 minutes after 1 minute break. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Shall we restart?
Yeah, 1 sec.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So now I'm going to tell you something about Craig's plot. Craig's plot is what you see on your screen. Okay. You can see that it has 4 quadrants. So normally you know that in the first quadrant, the all the plots X and Y both will have positive values. So I hope I don't have to tell you what is first quadrant, second quadrant, third quadrant, and fourth quadrant. Okay, you would have been told that in your school. Okay, so we have plotted sigma values and pi values for different groups. So this is like having different items on your in your grocery shop where you can pick and choose. So if you want, okay, from your analysis so far, a group which has got which should have high pi value, then you can pick one from the first quadrant. Okay, you can also pick it from the second quadrant. Similarly, if you want to have a sigma value which is very low, then you can choose from the second quadrant or the fourth quadrant. Okay, because the sigma values are the sigma values are on the y-axis and the pi values are on the x-axis. Okay, so make that correction. It was okay. So this is like various items being kept on in a grocery shop where you can go in and pick up whatever group you want and design a molecule. So it's a plot of two substituent parameters used in rational drug design. It's a plot of the substituent hydrophobicity parameter and the electronic parameter or Hammett constants on the x and y axis respectively. Choosing an appropriate substituent that would yield a molecule with the required bioavailability becomes very simple. The plot shows that there is no overall relationship between sigma and pi. The substituents are scattered all around on all the four quadrants of the plot. They are easy to identify substituents with positive and negative values, and also those substituents which have positive and one negative parameter. It is easy to identify the substituents that have similar pi values. Example, if you take, please go back to that slide to show, go to the previous slide. I think I will be constantly asking for this slide. This particular slide, I will be asking on and off. So kindly help me by helping me go to this. You take the case of bromine, ethyl and CF3. They will be all be lying on almost the same vertical line. I am talking about bromine, ethyl and CF3. Are you able to see it? Okay. They are all there in the first quadrant. Okay, this means that these groups are interchangeable, as the principal factor affecting bioavailability is the pi factor. Similarly, groups which are on the same horizontal line of the plot will have the sigma value, same sigma values, that is Cl, Br, I, COOH. Okay, so this is the beauty of the Craig plot. It helps you design a molecule with the required pi value or sigma value, because it indicates what are the groups which will have high pi values, low pi values, high sigma values or low sigma values. The next point which I am going to talk to you is about Topliss decision tree, which is very much dependent upon this Craig plot. So it is better that we shift back and forth to this Craig plot. So what is decision tree? Actually, Hansch analysis requires a large number of analogs to be synthesized in order to assess the equations. In certain situations, it may not be possible to synthesize all the compounds even because of synthetic feasibility. In such an instance, it would be useful to test the compound for a bioavailability, one compound, and thereafter to find out whether it is having a better activity than the previous one, whether it is having equal activity or whether it is having less activity, and thereafter follow a rational pattern. So Topliss method is a non-mathematical, non-statistical guide to use of Hansch principles for the most efficient optimization of activity of a lead structure. Okay, so here it is only logic that is going to play a part. You have a compound for which we will find out the biological activity. Then we will see whether the substituent present on it was the sole reason for the activity or not. So in this case, there are two possibilities. one scheme pertaining to substituents substituting on an aromatic system and another for the aliphatic system. I will explain using only one. Okay, so we will take the first one. The other one just follows. I will be showing you a scheme for the second one, but I will be explaining to you only one. Okay, that is, I will explain to you the one that pertains to the effect of substituents and the biological activity on an aromatic ring system. Okay. So the first derivative is the, so please see this, the first derivative, I think you don't change the slide. Let this slide be as such. Okay. Please don't, though I will be going to the next slide, let this slide remain constant. The first derivative, as you can see, is the 4-fluoro derivative. Actually, that is chosen. So we have an aromatic ring system. Okay, there's everything else in the molecule, but on there is an aromatic ring, and on that aromatic ring, I want to have a 4-fluoro group. So I make the 4-fluoro derivative, which is easy to synthesize. The chloro substituent is more hydrophobic and electron withdrawing. You can see in the Craig plot. In the Craig plot, it is in the first quadrant. Okay, that means both pi and sigma are having positive values. The synthesized derivative is tested for bioavailability. So you have chosen a compound, you have tried to synthesize the chloro derivative, and you find out the bioavailability. Okay. Now there are three possibilities. This compound could be better or have more bioavailability than the reference, or it could be equal, or it could be less. So what happens if it is more? Now we say that the fluorine group has contributed to the biological activity. Therefore, why should we stop with only one? Why don't we have two chloro groups? So more activity is the branch to the extreme right. You see what is written there. Can you see that we are trying to make a 3,4 dichloro derivative? Can anyone tell me if you are following the tree, the topless decision tree, and can someone tell me if you are able to see under M, under the M branch, are you able to see 3,4 dichloro? Let me have a response.
Yes,
yes or no?
Seen.
It is seen. Very good. Why did we do that? Because we found that the chloro derivative is more active than the original parent compound. Therefore, we thought, why don't we put one more chlorine and make it into a dichloro derivative? Okay, when you make it into a dichloro derivative, once again, there are three possibilities. One, that the dichloro derivative is more active, or it is just as equally active as the monochloro derivative, or it is less active than the monochloro derivative. So this brings us to understand that if the bioavailability is more, then the M branch will be followed. According to the M branch, the test analog to be synthesized is the 3,4 dichloro substituted analog. If the bioavailability is equal, then the E branch is followed, for which we make the 4-methyl analog. And if the bioavailability decreases, then the L branch is followed and 4-para-methoxy derivative is synthesized. So in the first scenario, the 4-fluoro substituent has pi and sigma values. If its bioavailability increases, that it implies that one or both of these properties contribute to bioavailability. If the both are important, adding another chloro group is expected to produce a derivative which is even more potent. If the activity increases, then the substituents are so varied to increase the sigma and pi values. If it does not increase, then an unfavorable steric interaction or excessive hydrophobicity is indicated. So further modifications, then the test relative importance of, then we have to test the relative importance of sigma, of pi and steric factors. In the second scenario, if the 4-fluoro derivative decreases in activity, then negative value for pi and or sigma is important for bioavailability of a para substituent, which is theoretically unfavorable. It is presumed that unfavorable sigma effect is most likely the reason for reduced activity, and so the next substituent is one with a negative sigma factor, that is 4-OCH3. If the activity improves further, changes are suggested to test the relative importance of sigma and pi factors. If activity does not improve, it is assumed that the unfavorable steric effect is as a whole, and the next substituent is a 3-chloro group. Modifications of this group would then okay. So we can do further modifications to this. Then the third scenario, if the activity of the 4-chloro analog doesn't significantly change, it could be due to the drug requiring positive pi value and a negative sigma value. As both the values for the chloro group are positive, the beneficial effect of the positive pi is cancelled or negated by the negative effect of a positive sigma value. So next substituent will be a 4-methyl derivative which has the necessary positive pi and negative sigma value. If it still does not have a beneficial effect, then it is assumed that there is an unfavorable steric effect, and so the 3-chloro substituent is next chosen. Please go through the other slides quickly and come to the substituents on an aliphatic side chain. Please go through the other slides and no, you have gone to the thank you slide. Okay, the next thing which I'm going to tell you, this is for the aliphatic. I think the explanation is the same. Okay, it only follows logic. There is no statistics or mathematics involved. But a quick recap is that we saw about how biological activity can be influenced by physicochemical parameters. Therefore, we develop a line of best fit which compares with the condition where we do not have any knowledge about an independent variable. Okay, after having arrived at a line of best fit, we try to validate it. The validation is done through F values, through R square values, and through error values. Okay, so the error value should be very less. The R square value should be around 0.81 or more, and the R value is greater than 0.9. Okay, then we saw the different physicochemical parameters, the hydrophobic parameter, the electronic parameter, and the steric parameter. Then we saw all these parameters being considered in Hansch analysis. Thereafter, we moved into Craig's plot and how Craig's plot will help us design molecules by choosing from a large number of substituents whose values are spread across the 4 quadrants graphically. And from there, we considered what is topless decision tree, where there is no statistics or mathematics involved, but a pure logic by which we can synthesize only one important lead molecule and compare it with a reference compound, and thereafter decide what should be the substituents that should go on the aromatic ring. Similar exercise can also be done on an aliphatic system. Thanks for the patient hearing. I hope this would have helped. I thank Oxford College of Pharmacy for having given me this opportunity and all the staff and students. Any questions you can ask?
Yeah, it is. Now we'll see who has asked the question. It was a nice session, a lengthier session, nice session. I think Shravani can see who are asked and we can ask them to.
Yeah, ma'am.
Shravani?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, you can. You were telling some person has asked, no?
Dr. Ashwini Sharma, Dr. Ashwini Mishra.
Am I audible, ma'am?
Yes, you are audible. Yeah, you can go ahead.
Sir, first of all, it was really a great session. I really enjoyed it, and you covered really some of the important point of QSAR. My question is, at the last you simply mentioned R square value, then you mentioned F value, and you said that R square value should be equal to 0.9, and the other value was.
I said R equal to R equal to 0.9 and R square greater than 0.81.
Yeah, and error value should be less. But what about F value, sir? What should be the F value?
No, F, see, that is about, then I will have to go into an even more lengthier session. It is out of the scope of this. That is why I did not elaborate on the F value. Okay, please reach out to a session in statistics. Okay.
Okay,
There
thank
are
you very much.
various tests. Okay, F test is one such. It's a test for significance.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much, sir.
Okay.
Still any other participants, you can please raise your hand.
I think it was a session which with a clear information. So that's why I think Gautam Yam has raised. You can speak.
Good morning, sir.
Yeah.
My question is like there are softwares to predict.
Not audible.
Now I'm audible.
Not audible at all.
Now, sir.
Maybe someone can read out his question.
No, it is yes to only speak. That only option is there.
Sir,
I think you can keep your mic close by. Your headphone mic. Yeah, you can speak, Mr. Gautam.
Now I'm audible, ma'am.
Yeah, you are not audible.
Now?
Not that much.
Can you hear me now?
Not audible. So we'll leave because your mic system should be strong enough. Anybody else? I'll give you sir's email ID. You can clarify if you have anything because your audio is not clear.
Okay, ma'am.
Anybody else?
Okay, so we take it closed.
Yeah. Okay, then you can, Shravani can propose vote of thanks.
Yeah, ma'am. Sure. Now we come to the end of this interesting and very informative webinar. It is now my pleasant duty to propose a vote of thanks on behalf of Chairman Sri SNVR Narsaraj Garu, the Oxford Group of Institutions, Dr. Padma M. Parekh, Principal, the Oxford College of Pharmacy, HODs of various departments and staff, and myself. I express my sincere gratitude to Dr. A. Girard Suresh, our guest speaker of today's session, for sparing his valuable time. Sir has explained the topic very well and shared very valuable information and related to QSR. So on behalf of all the participants and from the college, we all thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you and have a great day.
Yeah, you also have a great day. Thank you for giving an elaborated information. We'll end the session and feedback link will be sent by mail to all the participants. Then they can fill the feedback and automatically the certificates will be generated. So only 100 certificates get generated. So other certificates will be sent within 1 or 2 days. So please wait and then get your certificates. Within 2-3 days, all the certificates will be available. So with this, we will come to an end of the session, and